Talk to me about some prominent leaders in the Solomon Islands. You just mentioned the Chinese. They've been warning about the Chinese. What are they saying?
Indeed, there was a big investigative report done on the Solomon Islands over the last week, given that the Solomon Islands hosted the Pacific Games. The Chinese government paid for the $120 million brand new stadium that was used during the Games. And viewers will remember that Prime Minister Sogavare of the Solomon Islands postponed national elections because of the Pacific Games. Celsus Talafilu, who used to work for the Prime Minister Sogavare until he realised just how corrupt that man is and how much he's moved from democracy into China's orbit. He has basically come out and said, that's him right there, he has come out and said Australia needs to do more because the Solomon Islands, it sits in the most critical shipping lane that Australia has. Yeah. You know, if we send all of our stuff up to Northeast Asia, and you know, if the United States was to come to our aid, they've got to go past the Solomon Islands, and China has a grasp and control now over the Solomon Islands, which is unfortunate because 80 years ago a lot of US Marines died fighting the enemy back then, and now China's taken over.
Speaking of China, we spoke last week about the amount that's manufactured there. It's not just materials. What's seafood? What are we doing there?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. The New Yorker, which is a big magazine, did a really full-on investigative report about just how big the Chinese distant water fishing fleet is. And in fact, they control something over 60% of all of the world's aquaculture. Now, Australians might not be aware of this fact, and I certainly wasn't until I read the report, that Australians consume, the seafood that Australians consume, 70% of it comes from overseas. It's imported.
What?
Imported. Now,
really?
It's insane
like
because
a lot
it's
of
cheaper.
Other things, yeah.
It's cheaper, obviously, to buy cheap Chinese seafood. Yeah. And the laws pertaining to what suppliers of seafood in Australia are required to tell the consumer are very lax. Yeah. And so we're going to be eating Chinese seafood that's caught under horrible conditions with slave labour, which is what came out of this report. Slave labour in their distant fishing fleet, violence, abusive behaviours, workplace practices and all that sort of stuff. And that's the road we're going down because of industrial relations laws that are being pushed through by this government, and the fact that we've just got too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, too much green tape, and that's affecting Australian consumers.
The reliance we have on China is terrifying, but still friendly handshakes. When will we learn?
And hugs, remember.
And hugs, of course, always. Lincoln, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Merry Christmas.